Hey, 30 something gang, welcome back to the In Your 30s podcast where we have real, raw, and necessary conversations about love, growth, and the journey to finding something real. Today, we're diving into a topic that I personally feel is very crucial, yet very often ignored, and that is the signs that you are not ready to be dating. I know the pressure is real. And in your 30s, it can feel like there's a race, basically, to get to the relationship, get the rock, and get the riches of a real lasting love. But what happens when we are not actually ready to receive that yet? What happens when our life, our soul, or even our mental health is not prepared to give us what our hearts desire? That's exactly what we're going to unpack today. We're going to explore the major signs that you should probably hold off on dating and the consequences of ignoring these signs. And most importantly, we're also going to focus on how to shift towards healing and preparing yourself for receiving these riches. It's not about shaming yourself, but it's about self-awareness, setting yourself up for real love when the time is right and when it's ready for you. So grab a seat, get comfortable, and let's get into it. Now let's really explore the weight of societal pressure because, let's face it, it comes from everywhere. It's not just the subtle comments from your family or your friends. It's embedded in the very fabric of our social structures and cultural narratives. From the movies that we watch to the social media that we follow. We are constantly exposed to idealized timelines of what the world thinks we should be doing and when. And this could be something as far as graduating, when you should be getting a job, when you should meet the one, when you should be getting married, when you should have kids. We've all heard it. We've all heard that it doesn't take 5 years or 10 years to get married, as if getting married in 2 months is better. We've all heard that some people are moving too fast. There's both angles to what societal pressure we have. And most of the time, we do have the societal pressure to lock it down early. Start young, get married quick, have kids quick. It's really common. And this narrative creates a kind of blueprint that many people feel that they must follow. It's very rigid, and it really can lead to a mental undoing, honestly. But here's the catch. Society's expectations, as they can profoundly affect our mental and emotional well-being, are not absolute. Even if we feel like we're not keeping up. There's no one rule for when it all has to be done. A landmark study published in Psychology of Women Quarterly in 2017 discussed how women in particular often feel the societal pressure to settle down by certain ages. And funny enough, I think that 30 is an age that people look at and they say, I'm not married yet, I don't have kids yet, I don't have a house yet, like my life is not together. But that's not necessarily the case. Again, there's no set rule. This pressure is not only from family or romantic partners, but also from a much broader cultural message that views single adulthood as incomplete or less desirable. These external influences can lead to you having feelings of inadequacy, which could potentially cause anxiety and a building sense of failure. And this pressure is compounded by the increased visibility of basically everyone else having their life all together. We view highlight reels on social media, the love stories, and the romance in movies, and even the seemingly well-meaning but very invasive questions from our well-meaning family members. The anxiety caused by these pressures is so very real. For example, a 2015 study in the Journal of Health and Social Behavior found that individuals who perceive high social pressure to settle down report lower life satisfaction. They report higher stress levels, and they have greater feelings of loneliness. This sense of pressure to meet certain milestones can fuel negative emotions, and often it can push people into relationships or situations they may not be ready for. Now, let's consider something else as well: the fear of being left behind. According to the National Marriage Project in 2013, 72% of individuals aged between 25 and 34 reported that their peers' relationship statuses influenced how they viewed their own situation. The anxiety of not meeting those milestones can make people feel like they're falling short. Yet the research shows that those who marry or settle into relationships because of these pressures often experience a much higher risk of divorce and dissatisfaction. And I think a lot of times this is actually what contributes to the fact that you will see someone get out of an unhealthy, unhappy relationship, and instead of being by themselves, because it's also lonely and it's also dissatisfying, they jump into another bad, unhealthy relationship that has a much higher risk of being dissatisfied. The American Psychological Review in 2012 found that individuals who felt rushed into commitment based on external pressures often faced relationship instability and regret later on. Let's take this a step further. One study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships in 2019 explored how societal timelines and cultural norms around marriage influence our dating behaviors. Participants who reported feeling pressure to meet these norms were significantly more likely to stay in relationships that didn't align with their true values. Reason being, they just wanted to avoid the judgment or the embarrassment or even just the perceived loneliness of being single. And oftentimes we do see being single as being lonely instead of what it really is, which is making space for the people that fit. The study also showed that this pattern contributed to increased stress and resentment within relationships, illustrating that when societal expectations dictate personal decisions, the result can often be dissatisfaction or emotional dissonance. And personally, I know a lot of people who have rushed into relationships. It's been a rough or bad relationship, and ultimately they're too embarrassed to leave because they don't want to hear, "I told you so," or "we were right," or "we told you shouldn't do that." But they ultimately rushed into it because the same people that said that when they rushed into the relationship were pushing. And when are you going to, be serious? When are you going to get in a real relationship? When are you going to settle down, marry, have kids? Whatever the questions may be. And it's very hard to leave when you feel the weight of embarrassment in a relationship. What's crucial to recognize here is that societal pressure does not just affect those who are single. It can also impact those who are already in relationships. A Journal of Marriage and Family study from 2016 revealed that individuals who felt the weight of societal expectations around marriage and children were more likely to experience dissatisfaction in their current relationships. And it's true. We've all seen the women that start getting aggravated and start getting really antsy and, just truly wanting, to rush the process, basically. when all their friends start having kids and all their friends start getting married. And we've all seen the one girl that is always a bridesmaid but never a bride, and it affects her very deeply. Sometimes even to the point where her and her boyfriend end up breaking up or whatever, because he's like, this is too much pressure for me. And she's basically putting her pressure to get married and have kids quickly because all her friends are on him. And it strains the relationship. And it can. I mean, it truly, really can. Even when you want to be with that person, even when you love that person, even when you want to settle down with that person. Because at some point it does feel like you're just checking boxes off. In fact, the societal expectation to settle down could lead to the opposite of stability in any case. It could cause more tension, it causes misalignment, and it can even cause emotional burnout. And for me personally, when I learned this, I felt like this is why a lot of parents really seem like they don't like to be parents, because they became parents and got married or whatever due to the societal pressure of becoming a parent. And so you see it online a lot now. People are talking about how you can just tell some of these moms, some of these dads, they don't want to be parents. They never did. They had kids to have kids. They had kids to have babies. They don't want to be parents. This is a prime example of how those societal expectations can affect your life and put you in situations, or not really put you in situations, make you feel like you have to put yourself in situations that you're not ready for. So what exactly does this mean for us? It's essential to question the shoulds of our lives. Society might push us to follow a prescribed path, but we need to be honest with ourselves about what it is that we want and don't want, and whether or not that path aligns with your personal desires, your needs, and even your emotional readiness. That is so important too. Your emotional readiness to enter into a relationship or situation is so important to gauge and be honest with yourself. You have to ask yourself, am I ready for this relationship? Or am I simply rushing into it because I feel like I'm falling behind? And the thing about it is, as long as you're honest with yourself, it is okay to acknowledge that the societal clock is just ticking very loudly around us. We have to choose, ultimately though, to listen to our internal clocks instead. When you enter relationships out of genuine desire and readiness, not out of fear of missing out or, just wanting to stay caught up, the foundation that you put in that relationship is so much healthier. It's so much more fulfilling. And the connection is so much deeper because it's genuine and it's out of true desire to want to love this person. Taking the time to assess whether you are truly ready to give and receive love ensures that when you do meet someone, you're able to bring your best self into that relationship without the weight of all of these external expectations dragging you down, them down, and the relationship with it. So how do we know if we are ready to date? How do we know if we're ready to receive love, and how do we know if we're ready to give love? First things first, if you are still healing from a load of past trauma, you probably should not be dating right now. If you are still deeply affected by your past relationships, whether it's an ex who broke up with you or who broke you, childhood wounds, or unresolved emotional baggage, you may not have what it takes to build the foundation for something new. Not in order for it to thrive. A healed heart allows love to flourish, while an unhealed heart bleeds onto the person who didn't cut it. Dr. Nicole LePera, a holistic psychologist, emphasizes that unresolved trauma often leads to attracting the same painful patterns over and over. And research in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships confirms that individuals with unhealed attachment wounds are more likely to enter toxic relationships if you haven't taken time to process and heal and then pause before diving into something new. And we've all done it and we've all seen it. We've all seen how we get in a relationship and it ends, and then the next one is very similar, or the behavior is very similar, or we're allowing some of the same things. And we repeat these cycles. And it's a very hard cycle to break. But if you can sit down and you can heal the trauma that has allowed those cycles to thrive and live, the trauma that those cycles feed on, you have a better chance of breaking those cycles and being happier ultimately in the long run. And then you will have the building blocks and the tools that you need to build a safe and healthy foundation. Another way is if you are seeking love to fill a void. Maybe you feel incomplete without a partner by your side, or you're dating because you're lonely. Maybe you're bored or just afraid of being alone. If so, massive red flag. Love should complement the life that you already have. It should not complete it. It should not make it. It should not mold it. It should not be the rock that your life stands on. Because if that love goes away, your life needs to continue to go on and move forward and progress. So it can't be the foundation for your life. Your life has to be the foundation for your love. Psychologist Dr. John Emoto says that healthy relationships come from a place of fullness, not emptiness. Neuroscience also supports this. Dopamine, which is the feel-good hormone, spikes when we enter a new romance. But if we rely on relationships for happiness, we risk becoming dependent on that external validation. If you don't feel whole on your own, it's time to focus on self-love before inviting someone else in. Because here's the thing, they can fill that void for a little while. But again, if that love goes, you still have that void. Fill yourself. Fulfill what you need. Fill your soul, your mind, your body before you allow anyone else to step into your life. Love who you are. And it can take years to truly feel like your life is fulfilled and you're ready for a relationship in a way that you can invite a partner in and it be healthy and you're not depending on that relationship. But do it, because at the end of the day, you're either going to take years doing the work, or you're going to take years wasting your time in and out of relationships that never do what you need because they can't. They don't have that ability. They do not have the ability to fill you in your soul. Number 3 is if your life is in chaos. If your finances or career or your mental health is just absolutely in shambles, adding a relationship to the mix can feel more like an anchor than an asset. Stability within yourself creates stability within a partner. And the things that we give ourselves, we also will look for in other people. A 2022 study in the Journal of Marriage and Family found that financial stress is one of the top predictors of relationship dissatisfaction and breakups. A solid foundation in your own life makes you a better partner in the future. How are you going to be solid for your partner if you can't even be solid for yourself? Like how? Number 4 is if you have a fear of commitment or intimacy. If you struggle to let people in. if you sabotage relationships, if you run at the first sight of real intimacy, that's something to really work on before entering another relationship. Brene Brown, in her research on vulnerability, talks about how fear of connection often stems from deep-seated self-worth issues. So, like, if real love scares you more than it excites you, you should pause and reflect. A 2018 study in the Journal of Personality and Social Psychology found that fear of intimacy often leads to a cycle of short-term and unfulfilling relationships. And then number 5 is if you keep choosing the wrong partners. Do you keep dating emotionally unavailable people? Do you find yourself in the same toxic patterns over and over and over again? If so, it's probably not going to be bad luck. It's probably more of a sign that you need to do internal work, and a lot of it. When you heal, your taste in partners changes incredibly. You stop craving chaos and start craving and valuing consistency. Psychological research has shown that unresolved trauma can lead people to unconsciously seek out familiar or even unhealthy dynamics. This is why we repeat cycles. This is why we repeat the examples in the relationships that we've seen. Our, grandparents and our parents and maybe our aunts and our uncles and, whatever. This is why we get in these relationships and we say, oh, well, this guy is, crappy or whatever. And then the next guy's crappy too. And the next guy's crappy too. And the next guy's crappy too. And while the guy might be crappy, that's his own crap to deal with. You have to figure out, why do you keep picking these crappy men? That's your crap to deal with. So what happens when you say, hey, this is my crap to deal with, but you ignore the signs? Ignoring these signs of unpreparedness can lead to heartbreak, not just for you, but also for the people that you date as well. Sometimes we get into cycles of relationships and we're the toxic one, and we're hurting people. When we jump into relationships before we're emotionally ready, we often find ourselves repeating the same painful cycles. We fall into the same patterns of unhealthy dynamics, and the relationship becomes more of a drain instead of a source of joy or connection or intimacy. Rather than entering into partnerships that nurture and support us, we settle for relationships that feel like projects, where we're constantly trying to fix or change the other person, rather than building something healthy together. And we've all done it. We've all been with someone that we need to fix or feel like we need to fix because whatever reasons, whatever the issues are. And a relationship cannot thrive that way. It just cannot. It will never survive or thrive in that type of environment. Research in psychological science has shown that individuals who enter relationships primarily to escape loneliness are more likely to experience dissatisfaction and higher breakup rates. The study found that the drive to fill emotional voids often leads people to overlook red flags and enter relationships that aren't truly fulfilling. Imagine that, Imagine that, we just want to feel good so badly that we're willing to settle or ignore the big red truck coming at us full of red flags. These relationships tend to be based on external needs or desires, rather than a solid internal foundation. The study concluded that relationships built on loneliness and desperation often lack the emotional depth and stability necessary for long-term success. But the consequences don't stop there. Rushing into a relationship before you're truly ready can cause you to lose sight of yourself in the process. You may ignore your personal goals, your desires, or even your boundaries in favor of pleasing your partner or just trying to make the relationship work. And I think this is something we've all done as well, honestly. At least most of us, anyways, in one relationship or another, have lost ourselves or lost sight of ourselves. And many of us do it when we're married and in motherhood. But, I can remember in high school losing sight of who I was, even because I was with a guy. I would hang out with his friends and, all of these things. And it can truly be damaging to your mental health to realize one day you don't really know who you are without that person. The Journal of Personality and Social Psychology published a 2016 study that found that individuals who enter relationships when they are emotionally unprepared often experience a loss of identity. They adapt to the role of a partner without fully considering their own needs or desires. And over time, this self neglect can result in feelings of resentment, frustration, and dissatisfaction. Look at it from a psychological perspective. When we enter relationships from a place of emotional unavailability or insecurity, we tend to project our unmet needs onto our partners, expecting them to fill the voids within us. According to Dr. Harville Hendrix, a renowned therapist and author of Getting the Love You Want, this dynamic is often rooted in childhood experiences and attachment patterns. If we're unconsciously seeking validation or healing from a partner rather than working on our own emotional growth, we risk repeating the dysfunctional patterns in our relationships. A 2019 study in the Journal of Social and Personal Relationships found that individuals who enter relationships with unresolved emotional wounds often experience more conflicts as they may project their unresolved issues onto their partner. This creates a cycle where the relationship becomes more about managing emotional baggage than about building a fulfilling and balanced partnership. Over time, this emotional weight can erode the foundation of the relationship, making it harder to communicate effectively, making it harder to meet each other's needs, and making each other feel truly unsupported and like you're just lacking the support that you deserve from your partner. Another consequence of rushing into relationships is that it can stifle your personal growth. When you're not emotionally ready to share your life with someone, you may find yourself compromising your individuality. This may lead to a pattern where you prioritize the relationship over your own development or your career, your friendships, or even just your personal passions. A 2020 study in personal relationships found that individuals who rush into romantic partnerships without a solid personal foundation are more likely to lose their sense of self. This loss of self can make it difficult to find balance in the relationship and can ultimately lead to dissatisfaction or feelings of even being trapped. In addition to emotional burnout, entering a relationship prematurely can also hinder your ability to set boundaries. A study published in the Journal of Social and Clinical Psychology in 2018 found that individuals who lack emotional readiness often struggle to establish clear boundaries, leading to resentments or miscommunication. Boundaries are essential in maintaining a healthy relationship, but when we rush into things or ignore our internal warnings, we fail to create the space necessary for both us and our partner to feel respected and valued. So, what happens when we ignore these signs? We risk entering relationships that are ultimately unfulfilling, unsustainable, and can possibly even be harmful to ourselves or our partner. We find ourselves emotionally drained, we lose sight of our own needs, and our own identity in the process. And worst of all, we miss out on the opportunity to truly heal and grow and find the kind of love that's rooted in emotional readiness and mutual respect. If we want relationships that are truly rewarding, we need to start by doing the hard work of healing ourselves, going on our self-discovery journey, and finding self-love. Only then we can enter into partnerships where we bring our whole selves and our partners do the same. Until that point, rushing into a relationship is like trying to build a house without a foundation. No matter how pretty it looks on the surface, it's bound to crumble. I get it, I get it. This is all good and dandy, but now you need to know how to shift towards healing. If you've been in relationships that left emotional scars, or if you've never fully processed your past heartbreaks or traumas, the first step to getting ready for a healthy relationship is healing. Healing is not an instant fix. It's not overnight and it's not linear. It's a continuous process that requires dedication. It requires self-awareness, and it really requires you to be emotionally brave because you have to face some hard facts about yourself and be honest. And honesty hurts. Here's how to shift towards healing with a few examples for each step. First off, you need to acknowledge the wounds. The first and most important step in healing is acknowledging that you have emotional wounds. So imagine Emma, who was in a long-term relationship where her partner was emotionally neglectful. Emma didn't realize how much that affected her until she tried dating again years later and found herself feeling unworthy or even just constantly doubting her partner's intentions. Acknowledging this hurt is essential because if she doesn't, it's going to continue to show up in her future relationships. By confronting the pain and understanding how it shaped her perception of love, she begins the healing journey. So, after reflection on her past, Emma finally admitted that she had been ignoring her emotional needs for years. She acknowledged that her ex's lack of affection and emotional availability made her feel invisible. And with this awareness, she started the process of healing by allowing herself to grieve and letting go of any guilt for not recognizing these issues earlier. It's step by step. Second thing is you need to break the cycle of repetition. Many people unconsciously repeat the same emotional patterns in relationships. Oftentimes, this is because the dynamic just feels familiar or safe. So, for example, John found himself constantly dating emotionally unavailable people, just like his father, who had been distant and emotionally withdrawn. After spending time in therapy, John began to understand that he was subconsciously seeking out partners who mirrored his unresolved childhood dynamics. Once he recognized this, he was able to change his dating choices and consciously seek emotionally available and supportive partners. John worked with a therapist who helped him realize that his fear of intimacy was rooted in childhood experiences, instead of continuing to fall for partners who were distant and emotionally unavailable. John began to date individuals who could communicate openly and honestly, and it helped him build healthier relationships moving forward. Another thing is we need to be self-aware. Healing requires a deep understanding of ourself. It requires a very deep understanding of our triggers, our emotional patterns, and just who we are and how we behave. For example, Lisa had a habit of pushing people away whenever they got too emotionally close and often finding excuses to distance herself from people. After spending time reflecting and journaling, Lisa realized that her fear of rejection was rooted in a previous relationship where she had been cheated on. This realization helped her understand that her emotional walls were a defense mechanism. Now that she is aware of these patterns, she can work on letting her guard down when she meets someone who earns it. When Lisa started journaling about her relationships, she discovered that every time a partner expressed interest in her future, she would suddenly feel the need to distance herself and pull back. So, by recognizing this pattern, she was able to take steps towards emotional growth by acknowledging her fear and allowing herself to feel vulnerable with people that she trusted. Because sometimes it is still hard to be vulnerable with the people that we trust because of the people that we trusted in the past who let us down. Number 4, across the board, is practicing forgiveness. And when I say across the board, I mean across the freaking board. Not just towards them, but towards you too. Towards yourself. Forgiveness is crucial to healing. It is so crucial. And this includes forgiving yourself. So important because we are our biggest critics and we can put the most shame and the most guilt on ourselves above anybody. For example, Alex held on to anger towards his ex for a long time after the breakup. And, he was convinced that he had been wronged. And this bitterness was consuming him and preventing him from moving forward. And he realized through tools like therapy and self-reflection that forgiveness wasn't about condoning the other person's actions, but it was more about freeing himself from the emotional chains and dwelling in it and feeling it all the time. And he also had to forgive himself for staying in the relationship way longer than he should have. So with time and effort, Alex let go of the anger and the resentment, and it really helped him open himself up to healthier future relationships. Alex struggled with forgiving his ex for their betrayal, but after working with a therapist, he understood that forgiveness was not about excusing his ex or, allowing behavior, but instead it was about releasing him from the emotional burden that he carried with him over that behavior for months. And once Alex forgave himself and his ex, he felt a lot lighter and more at peace with his past. Number 5, learn to set healthy boundaries. One of the most important steps in healing is learning to set boundaries, not just with others, but yourself. For example, Sarah had a pattern of overgiving in relationships. She would prioritize her family's needs over her own, neglect her emotional well-being, and it was really draining for Sarah. After a particularly draining relationship, Sarah realized that she had to start setting clear boundaries. She began by expressing her needs more clearly and saying no when necessary, because at the end of the day, no is a complete sentence. There doesn't need to be anything following. There doesn't need to be an explanation. And this really empowered her to build healthier relationships. Sarah used to feel really guilty about asking for space or expressing her needs, but after therapy, she learned that healthy relationships are built on mutual respect and that setting boundaries doesn't mean that you are selfish. Sarah began to communicate more openly about what she needed from her partners and took time for herself when she needed it, ensuring that her emotional needs were met. A key part to healing is practicing self-care. So for number 6, we're going to focus on self-care and self-love. So let's say Mark had always been the one to care for others, but he realized that he had neglected himself in the process. After his last breakup, he decided to focus on self-care activities like meditation, working out, pursuing hobbies that he enjoyed, and anything else that would give him a sense of fullness from himself, from deep within. By dedicating time to himself, Mark began to rebuild his self-esteem and his sense of worth. As he practiced self-love, he recognized that he didn't need a partner to feel valued. He was enough on his own. Mark used to spend all his free time taking care of his ex. He never focused on himself. And after the breakup, he took up multiple hobbies, including hiking and different things that he never really had time for before, but he loved to do. He also started meditating to center himself, and these acts of self care helped him feel more grounded and emotionally ready to engage in a healthy relationship again. And then, of course, for number 7, you need to seek professional support if necessary. If you find yourself stuck in the healing process, seeking professional support can be a game changer. For instance, Rachel had been in a series of emotionally abusive relationships and was struggling to move past the trauma. She finally sought out therapy where she worked through her deep-rooted issues around her self-worth. And with her therapist's help, Rachel was able to start rewriting the negative beliefs that she had about herself and about relationships. Rachel had been in therapy for a few months before she began to really feel a change, but she worked with her therapist and she helped her to identify that she felt unworthy of love and had been repeating unhealthy patterns. With professional guidance, she began to build a healthier view of herself and learn how to foster healthy relationships, which is so very important because if you don't view yourself worthy and you don't find love for yourself, how can you give something you don't even have to give yourself? Now, healing is a journey, and once you've shifted towards healing, the next step is knowing when you're truly ready for a relationship. It's not just about being healed, it's about being in a place where you're ready to share your life with someone else and you can accept them sharing their life with you. Here are a few signs that you're ready with a couple examples to help clarify each point. Number 1 is you are emotionally independent. You are no longer dependent on someone else to complete you, to make you happy, to present your joy to you and fill your voids. So, for example, let's say Emily went through a painful divorce, but she spent time focusing on her own growth. She pursued new interests, she rebuilt her social circle, and she took on new challenges. So when she did meet someone new, she was confident in her own emotional independence and felt ready to share her life with someone. Not because she needed them, but because she wanted to build something meaningful together. After her divorce, Emily enrolled in a photography course. She started traveling alone, and she focused on developing a strong sense of relationship with herself. When she felt emotionally whole, she entered a new relationship from a place of self-assurance and knowing that she could stand alone if needed, but also welcomed the joy of sharing her life with someone. One thing that I actually like to do on my own that people actually don't enjoy doing on their own is going out to eat. I love to go out to eat by myself and just go sit down by myself and eat. And generally, when I first started doing this, it was really uncomfortable, but it truly helped me find joy in just being by myself and doing things that I normally wouldn't do without another person to do by myself and feel comfortable doing those things. The second sign that you are ready is that you have realistic expectations. Being ready means that you have realistic expectations for the relationship and the person you're in a relationship with. For example, Alex used to think that love would be perfect and without struggle. And after some reflection and reading books on relationships, Alex deeper understood that the challenges in relationships are inevitable, but they can bring growth. Now, when Alex enters a relationship, he has a realistic outlook and an understanding that love requires effort and compromise and mutual respect. In his past relationships, Alex would get disappointed whenever there was a conflict, believing that it meant the relationship wasn't right or going to last. After doing the work to understand what healthy relationships look like, he now sees challenges as opportunity for growth and communication instead of signs of failure. And I think this is so important because oftentimes we think that if we get in a relationship with the right person, they will just fall right into place and things will be easy and there will be no arguments and no fights and no disagreements. And the thing about it is, it's just not realistic to have no problems ever in your entire life. And that includes in your relationships. The third sign is that you have a strong sense of self. Knowing who you are and what you want indefinitely in the moments in your life when these decisions have to come up and when you need to express these is crucial when you enter into a relationship. Having that ability to express your wants and be able to be who you are is so crucial. For example, Sarah had spent years adjusting to what others wanted in a partner. After taking time for herself, she realized that she valued honesty, she valued adventure, and she needed emotional depth to thrive in a relationship. With this clarity, Sarah no longer compromised on her values in relationships and confidently pursued partners who aligned with her goals. Sarah had always dated people who were focused on career success, and even though she wanted someone who valued a work-life balance, once she clarified her values, she found a partner who shared her love of travel and exploration, and their relationship was actually able to thrive because they aligned on what actually mattered most to them instead of sacrificing what they need and what they want in order to please their partner. With number 4, you're going to want to be open to vulnerability. Being emotionally ready means that you're willing to open up and be vulnerable. For example, Dan had always kept his emotions really close to his chest, but after a few failed relationships, he realized that emotional intimacy was necessary for a lasting connection. Dan started sharing his feelings more openly with his friends, family, and gradually even felt comfortable expressing vulnerability in romantic relationships. Dan used to shy away from talking about his emotions, but after reflecting on his past, he recognized that true intimacy requires vulnerability. In his next relationship, he openly communicated his fears and hopes, which allowed both him and his partner to connect on a much deeper level. Number 5, you've healed from your past wounds. If you have fully healed, you will not carry your past baggage into your new relationship. So, Mia had gone through a very painful breakup and spent years working through the emotional scars that it had left. She focused on her emotional health, forgave her ex, and let go of any lingering resentment. When she started dating again, she did so without any emotional baggage, ready to build something new. Mia spent a year working through her grief and forgiving herself for the mistakes that she had made in her past relationship. And by the time that she entered a new relationship, she was no longer comparing her new partner to her ex or herself to her partner's ex. And instead, she embraced the present, bringing fresh energy to her new connection. And number 6, you're ready to be there for someone else. Being ready for a relationship means you're prepared to give as much as you receive. For example, Jake used to prioritize his own needs and struggle to put his partners first. After spending time reflecting on his past relationships, Jake realized that in a healthy relationship, both partners should equally invest in one another's happiness. Now, Jake looks for ways to support and uplift his partner, knowing that relationships require mutual effort. Jake used to expect his partners to cater to his needs, but after reflection, he realized that healthy relationships require balance. Now he actively listens to his partner's concerns, supports their dreams, and works towards building a partnership that nurtures both individuals. And there you have it. Healing isn't a destination, it's a journey. It's about giving yourself the grace and the space to grow and learn and evolve. Before diving into a new relationship, ask yourself, am I truly ready to give love? And am I ready to receive it in return? Remember, the more you focus on your own healing and your own growth, the more you'll be able to offer a healthy, supportive partnership when the time is right. If you're still on the path of self-discovery or healing, know that it's okay to take your time. There's no need to rush, and the right relationship will come when you're truly prepared, and that's when it will be the most fulfilling. Thank you for tuning in today. I hope this episode gave you the clarity and insight you needed. If you found value in this, do not forget to subscribe, share, and leave a review. I'd love to hear about your experiences with healing and how you've navigated your own journey towards being truly ready for love. Until next time, take care of yourselves and remember, healing is the most important relationship you will ever have.